In my personal understanding, addiction is a consequence of developmental trauma, which caused the lack of very specific neurological architecture that was never developed in order to translate sense perception picked up from our environment, incorporated into our body. But when it comes to the translator, it's not there. It's not there. The ability was never developed in order to translate all of these feelings and these emotions. So we find a way to numb it. This video is about trauma and addiction. And before I get into it, some transparency. I'm in a shit mood today. I woke up tired. It took me hours before I felt that I could actually function as a human being. I did not want to get in front of the camera and make this video. Then I remembered what I know. So I took a long shower, went for a walk on the beach, put on a nice shirt, and now I'm here. Now I still feel shit, but I'm starting to feel better. And in essence, all of the underlying mechanisms internally, what's causing me to feel better now, is what this video is about. And trauma and addiction. I want to be honest, okay? I want to be transparent. So I think rather than go straight into the mechanisms and the knowledge and the information and the stuff like that, I want to put some of my own cards on the table. I have a very colorful history with addiction. I have an even more colorful history with both childhood and very long-term adolescence and adulthood trauma. Childhood, both developmental as well as big T trauma, and adolescence and adulthood also both developmental as well big T trauma. Now, in today's narrative, in the scientific and the psychological community, we translate this as complex PTSD. I have to think about that. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And basically, in a nutshell, what it means is it's a hell of a lot of trauma altogether, right? Completely. I want to focus specifically on the addiction parts of my own personal journey. And the reason I'm doing that is to show you that, I'm a human being. So if you're watching this and thinking, oh, Marcel this, Marcel that, no, Marcel is sitting here putting himself on the internet in front of you, hoping that you would fucking listen to this message and get the inspiration to do the things necessary in order to make your life better for yourself and for those people around you. I was basically drunk for 10 years of my life. I started drinking when I was 27. In later videos, I will go much more into detail of my own story, what happens, why, all those things. But in essence, for 10 years, I drank roughly a bottle of vodka and 2 bottles of wine every day. I was drunk for 10 years. It had an incredible effect on not only myself, but the people that loved me in my life as well. My favorite thing to do was to take my diary and write down, next week I will start or stop. Next month, I want to be at a different place. Next year, my life will be different. It took me 10 years to get there. So I'm very happy to tell you that I've been totally off alcohol completely since 2017. And not because I'm a strong person or, not because I'm courageous. And of course, like, courage and bravery has a shit ton to do with it, right? But not because of those things. because I figured out why I drank in the first place. And once I realized that, I didn't need it anymore. Let's go into details. Nature and nurture. This argument has been going on for centuries, especially, after dogma, basically, especially clergy, and then with Protestants, 1500s, that changed quite a lot, and then Descartes came, right, and Darwin came. All of a sudden, massive explosion in ideas and wonderfulness. But it was still this kind of bipolar, what do I call it, separateness between you're either this or you are that. Happily, right, because of people like Bruce Lipton today and his research in epigenetics, we're starting to get a very clear picture of how these two areas are completely related. 100%. And it is so beautiful, right? I'm so happy to be living in this time, right? Epigenetics are amazing. Absolutely amazing. Before I go into that, let's talk a little bit about nature and nurture. Up until really the early 2000s, the scientific community was still under the predisposition that majority of what we are is genetic based. In other words, we don't have control. We don't have power. What we end up being is already rewritten. One of my favorite words in Arabic, it's called maktub. Means it's written down already. Total different contexts, right? But that's what it means. It's written down already. Now, if we believe this, of course, through the power of self-belief, we are probably 99% going to become whatever we believe, right? This has been proven many times before. I was reading an article about Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, and specifically one thing stood out for me. During the start in his young adulthood, he applied for a job in KFC when KFC came to China. He was a part of 24 that applied for it, and he was the only one who did not get the job. The only one! He applied 10 times to get into college, and he didn't get in. Today he's one of the most successful people on this planet. Why is that? In his context, as he describes it, the most valuable thing he learned was to learn from rejection. Which is really a lot to do with this video. Because if we accept how our environment tells us we are, then we have no power, no control to change that at all, right? We are powerless to design and create our lives and our destiny. So you believe you can't change, and you don't change. Right? In a nutshell, really, this is what it is. Now, if we think about all of the suppression that have been put on the global population since basically the very beginning, right? It's no wonder. It's no wonder that we think we can't change. It's no wonder. It's very sad if you think about it. I'm here to tell you that that is just not true, right? And there is a cohort of other people that really know that as well. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, many, many, many people, Gabor Mate, these are wonderful individuals that are figuring out all of these things out as well. So, nature. Science used to tell me that I was addicted because my dad was an alcoholic when he was a child. Okay? Not when he was a child, when he was an adult. Science used to tell me that I was an alcoholic because my grandmother was an alcoholic for 47 years. Science used to tell me that I had no control over these things, that I was predestined to become an alcoholic. So from very early on in my childhood, this was something that was prominent in my mind. Marcel, be careful of that. Don't smoke. Oh my God, both your parents smoke. Marcel, don't drink. You're going to become an alcoholic. Now, you bring childhood trauma into this. My dad was an alcoholic, caused some serious trauma inside me because I was the eldest, and so inevitably I ended up being the protector, right, against him. This caused scars, okay, scars that I was only able to incorporate and learn from, and that helped me to evolve as a human being, but only in my later adulthood. Effectively, the biggest scar that it caused inside of me was that I was shit scared of life. You know, I was powerless to decide anything. I developed this internal identity of I need their permission. Before I do anything, I need to ask first and see what do they think about it, because if they don't approve it, then I can't do it. As an adult, right? As an adult. So there was this hole. Now that's the nurture part. Let's go back to the nature part. From a neuropsychological point of view, okay, current research is showing us that coded DNA versus non-coded DNA, I'll go a little bit into it. Coded DNA represents nearly 90+%. No, sorry, non-coded DNA represents nearly 90% of our actual genes, right? The rest of it is coded, pre-coded DNA. Now, the main difference between coded and non-coded DNA is that coded DNA already has the instructions to write proteins. Non-coded DNA is basically epigenetics, right? It's epigenetic DNA with the main function of waiting to see what the environmental stimuli is so that it can know how to react. What am I saying? 90% of us, these bodies that we're born into, wait to see what the environment tells us. And then we develop the neural pathways and structures and the physiological systems to deal with that, right? To adapt to that. So majority of the cases, really what we thought, that I am doomed to be an alcoholic, was never true. All right, a lot of this had to do with the social, cultural conditioning and traditional conditioning, because I'm from South Africa, right? Like, I don't know how much you know about the country, but the social conditioning there was pretty tough, right? Pretty tough. So all of that social conditioning telling me I'm a man, I'm supposed to be like this, my dad is like this, trying to avoid that, standing up against an alcoholic as a child, you know, all of these things, basically. So I had scars. These scars developed this hole inside my soul. A hole in my heart, right? Now, a hole in my heart is a metaphor. It's a metaphor that I use to describe something that we're starting to get a very clear picture now of, based on Joe Dispenza's research. Let's go back into the trauma side of it. So when we go through developmental trauma as a child, parts of our brain to process that trauma and to give us the actual cohesive, big meaning of what is happening and what is actually represented in the situation is not there. Okay, this stuff only gets developed later on during our life. As a result of this, we're not able to incorporate what is actually happening. So the feelings that we experience based on this intense, high intense environmental stimuli, these feelings remain in our bodies. Okay? Your vagus nerve is there, but the place to bring that information to, for the information to be translated, does not yet exist. And this is why trauma is so fundamental. Okay? And this is why this video is to do with trauma and addiction. If this happens during your childhood, All of the mechanisms necessary to understand your own pain does not exist yet. Okay? So you get triggered. What happens when you get triggered? That information goes to your brain. Your brain looks for, listen, Marcel, let's figure out what's happening. The neural pathways are physically not there yet. In order to code this information into a logic system of what the hell is happening here. So that information goes back. That electricity, it goes back through your vagus nerve. And it goes back to the original pain. Okay, the original pain. All of that energy that still lies dormant and suppressed in your body wakes up like sleeping giants. And this is why it's so intense. Because you feel that, right? You feel that massively. So as an adult then, when we realize these things as individuals, there are very specific mechanisms, guided mechanisms, that can be followed in order to not redesign, but actually create a new design for these feelings to be processed and translated. Why do you think change is so hard? Because you're creating something internal, an internal neural structure that is not there yet. How much energy do you think that takes? The reason I give you the example, and the reason I told you today that I was not in a good mood, right, and low of energy, is because I'm showing you that it's possible. Look at all this energy I have now, right? But if I went with the easy way would have been to follow the predetermined system that was there. Marcel, you don't feel like it, just, it's okay you feel like it. That's okay as well, of course that's okay. But I know myself, I know if I took the first route, I probably would have just sat there and started feeling bad that I'm not doing this, because I'm practicing consistency myself, right? So once again, this is a very individual process. Even though the architectural structure is the same for everybody, because our bodies are built on the same blueprints, our internal environment is different. So what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. Figure out a way that's good for you, and please, it starts with not being so hard on yourself as well. What else is there? I have my notes here, but I completely got distracted. As you can tell, I'm super passionate about the subject, right? Because I spent a hell of a long time in my life thinking that I did something wrong and that I was a bad person. And then I figured out, no, this is how people saw me based on the pain that I caused in them because of the pain that was caused in me by my upbringing. This is how the loop works. The people around you get hurt by us, but we are hurt by someone else. Now, the first steps in breaking this loop is to realize, yes, this happened. Okay, but now I'm an adult. So what is the repercussion of this? I'm hurting, yes, but my behavior is also hurting people that I love around me. And then you decide, what is bigger? The pain of staying the same or the fear of change? And that is something only you can decide. Only you. Nobody else. From a kind of to tap a little bit more into Gabor Mate's work. Oh, I love that man. I love that man. He describes very perfectly, right, how when we undergo childhood trauma, that our primary need for safety and security is not being met, right? Because our primary caregiver is going through their own stuff, and then because we don't have the faculties yet to process this information, what happens is we internalize it, we turn it around, and we end up thinking that I'm doing something wrong. I do that because it's much easier for me to process as a child that I'm doing something wrong than to actually put my sense of survival into danger. Right, a pretty straightforward logical process. The problem with this is it depends a very powerful sense of powerlessness. Right, powerlessness. It creates this pattern that I have no control, that my life, my safety, my survival, my belongingness, my everything depends on somebody else. So in effect, I start my childhood and I go into adolescence practicing subconsciously feeling powerless. Now, interesting fact, did you know that based on current research, right, we estimate that around 90% of our psychological processes are subconscious. Subconscious, right? Means most of the time we don't know that this is happening because it is very deep underneath everything. Feeling based, right? Neural activity based, which means we don't have the psychological translations yet in order to code this information, which is how I transcribe personally what subconscious is. Back to powerless. So we become powerless because we fear that our survival is in danger. And then we say, I have to, it's better that I think I did something wrong because I'm not continuing to put my survival in danger. And we get into adulthood. Right? We get into adulthood. So what happens if I believe that I am powerless? Subconsciously, I put my perception out and I start thinking that until this happens, that won't change. We start creating these conditionals. One of the major conditionals is I need a rescuer. I need somebody to rescue me. I need somebody to take me away from all of this turmoil. I need somebody to change my life for me. Now, very quick sideline. What effect do you think this has in relationships? Right? Attachment theory beautifully goes into this. Codependency. Where do you think codependency comes from? It's because subconsciously I have a very, very dormant feeling that's lying there underneath everything, still activated every now and again when I get triggered. But the primary belief is that I don't have enough power to actually be self-sufficient, right? To be independent, to be in relative control of my own life, destiny, day to day, things like this. So we become dependent, very unhealthily dependent on other people, right? This is not good. I was there as well. Happy to say I changed it. The other side of this is then, if we do, like me, kind of have this extra little bit of cultural conditioning telling you what you're supposed to be as a person, right? You're supposed to be a strong man, or you're supposed to be a beautiful, elegant woman, or your role is this, or your role is this, or your role is this. That shit is tough to deal with. Then, of course, you develop what I spoke before about, a very fragmented internal identity, which you still have to face somewhere in your future, but the main consequence of this development is avoidance, right? Avoidance. We don't look for anybody to rescue us, and we just cannot deal with all of this pain and this overwhelm and these feelings. Those neural pathways never get opportunities to create this new structure in order to put everything together so that you can learn what is the translation of these feelings. You avoid it. How do you avoid it? You avoid it by numbing it. And this is where addiction comes in. In my personal understanding, addiction is a consequence of developmental trauma, which caused the lack of very specific neurological architecture that was never developed in order to translate sense perception picked up from our environment, incorporated into our body. But when it comes to the translator, it's not there. It's not there. That ability was never developed in order to translate all of these feelings and these emotions. So we find a way to numb it. You're not doing anything wrong. Okay? Addiction is a double-sided sword. It is both the most natural protective self-protective mechanism, my brain went, right? I'll do it again. The most natural self-protection mechanism, as well as the most self-destructive. Right? It's there to protect you from not getting hurt again. But in this attempt to protect yourself, we're destroying so much around us. We're causing damage in our children. We're causing trauma in our children. We're breaking our relationships, personal and social. It's very, very damaging. We have the ability to change these things. And everything starts with, yes, I'm giving you a lot of information, right? But I'm doing this with the hope that you actually watch this and you watch it again and you incorporate this and that it triggers something in your minds that you realize, I am not giving up. I don't want to give up. My end can be my beginning, my end of the old version that I have become because of how life was to me. Most of the people I work with they became addicted to success. Completely like this. In work for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And then they come to me and they go, Marcel, I don't understand why my children don't talk to me. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 5 years. She's wrong. Why is she doing this? Nature and nurture. Epigenetics. That child learned in her environment. Her daddy wasn't there. Her daddy came back home and he started drinking to relax. For him, those were his coping mechanisms in order to protect himself, as well as deal with the pressures that his life was putting on him at that very moment in time. But his daughter, her primary needs of safety and security, belongingness and self-expression was never met. So she inevitably started thinking that she's doing something wrong. And then she grew up thinking that daddy caused this. And until daddy changes, I can't change. Do you see this circle? Everything is connected. It's nobody's fault because everybody is responsible. Everybody. And what we can do as adults is we can change ourselves. By doing this, we automatically start meeting our fourth and final human needs. Our need for social philanthropy. We start making everything around us better because we've looked after ourselves. I'm happy now I made this video. As you can see, I think I have about 4 subscribers on this channel, right? I'm making videos again and getting on stuff on this. I'm working on a book project. I'm developing courses. But I'm asking you to, if you get this far and you're this half an hour in, can you please like and subscribe this and leave a comment so that I can start building up some traction? I would very much appreciate that. And once again, like I said in all the other videos as well, if this is something that you resonate with, if this is something that you're going through at the moment, you don't have to go through it alone. You know, you really don't. You're very welcome to reach out to me. A chat costs nothing at all. Take care and look after yourself.